Hi, I'm Jackie Bernard, Programs Assistant at Uncle Don's Cabin Historic Site, the home of Josiah Henson. And I am so excited to share with you a series of videos we filmed called Discovering Don. The short videos are a look at the contributions that African Canadians have made to the development of my hometown, Dresden, Ontario. The town was a final destination for hundreds of refugees from American slavery. We had the pleasure of working with local historian Marie Carter.
So Jackie, you know, from having worked at Uncle Tom's Cabin, there's so many mysteries around the last days of the British American Institute. We have Henson's autobiographies, of course, but there's not a lot of detail about what happened to the infrastructure of the British American Institute. There was a brickyard there that produced 100,000 bricks, and they built the school out of that. Henson was responsible for a sawmill and then later a grist mill. And we know that the sawmill was destroyed, but we don't think that that's what happened to the grist mill. But what did happen to it? These are some of the enduring mysteries of the British American Institute's history. Well, as we get reading the surrounding histories of the town and different things, there's these tantalizing little clues, things we can't really prove, but we're left with some interesting questions. And I'm just brought you to this site because I thought it would be kind of fun to look at what one of the possibilities just might be. And, you know, behind us is this 20th century built set of silos. And you might ask yourself, now what's that got to do with 19th century Black history? But it tells us that this was a mill site. And if we look back in the records, we can trace back to when it was Lambton Kent Grain, and then much earlier it was Taylor Milling Company, and then a succession of other owners that goes all the way back to William Wright, who was the founder of Fairport and had a mill on his Fairport survey. Now, William Wright was an Irishman who came to Dresden in about the 1840s, slightly before when Josiah Henson would have come here. And I'm sorry, it must have been 1830s. I made an error there because Henson was here by 1840. Wright is, by the accounts in a history by Robert Brandon that was written in about 1951, talks about how there was this friendship between Josiah Henson and Wright. And Wright is supposed to have given Henson his very first place to stay when he arrived in the community, which was an old store that he had owned. And Henson is said to have stayed there briefly before he developed his own property. And Wright also shows up at other points in the Henson history, and the really interesting point at which he shows up in Brandon's history is around the moving of the mill. And Brandon claims that Reverend Josiah Henson and Wright worked together to move the BAI mill from the BAI site to one of Wright's properties. Now, how do we believe that this is a true history? How do we verify this? It's hard to verify all of the details, but Josiah Henson says in his autobiography that when they built the grist mill, he looked for someone from the community to actually manage it. And so here we have this possibility that that unnamed person in his autobiography was actually right, and that this story by Mr. Brandon is true. If that's true, this is the most likely place where the BAI grist mill would have moved. Mm-hmm. And the intriguing part, the really intriguing part of that is across the road is William Wright's final home. Now, the plaque in the peak of the roof says 1870, but I'm assured by Architectural Conservancy people that this house is indeed earlier than that, probably around the 1850s. And you'll notice the really unusual brick in this building, and you can see where you have these black bricks that are possibly from being fired in an outdoor kind of kiln. And anyhow, here we have again. What happened to those 100,000 bricks? Could this be some of them? Could Wright have, besides moving the mill, also have, taken advantage of the fact that there were these bricks also on the site and removed some of those? We have no way of knowing, but it is one of the more intriguing buildings. It is the oldest brick structure in Dresden, and leaves us with these interesting questions that we hope someday we'll be able to shed more light on.